we have to do.
Oh, sorry. Where did Donna go? She just disappeared. I started the recording and she quit. I wanted to record just because I want to put it up to YouTube for anyone who can't make it. But
If you hit the wrong button, you go away.
really? Okay, we'll wait for her. She'll come back. Hope
She
she
always does. She always does.
If you feed them, they will come back. Okay, well, I mean, I see where Donna's going. I think one thing that I would emphasize in this particular practice, and then when she comes back, I'll give her the mic back, but is that sometimes also in a practice, especially one now, this practice is very laid out. So we really can look at, oh, this is where the practice is going. Okay, before we didn't, it was a little veiled, because we were still kind of creating it and organizing it. But one of the things I think that are super important about the first three techniques is that it will include the voice of power. It will include the thought. And one of the things that I think may happen in this practice, and I sort of anticipate it, is that we look at the first three pillars are designed to create gaps in the overall amount of thinking. That's its sole purpose, is to create space. But it doesn't do that right away. Initially, because the mind is so used to moving, it's so used to having thought momentum that we go with that momentum rather than against it. We just start to redirect it. So how we talk to ourselves is in some ways a mindfulness technique. And especially when I talk about the directions of attention, if what you're saying in your mind in this moment is deliberate, it's intentional, and it's on purpose, it has the characteristics of everything that we're doing. Do you see what I mean? So, oh, sorry, Donna. I thought I started recording and you're just like, nope, can't.
You know how I hate being recorded.
I know, I'm sorry.
On screen.
And now it just says it. I don't know
leave
why.
meeting and I hit the leave meeting button instead of got it. But what I was trying to say is I recognized at first I had the battle in my mind. This class isn't for me. These are really old people. They can't even move because it's in a senior center. And this isn't the Tai Chi class for me. Maybe I should have joined the intermediate one. And then I just decided to be patient. And that was really just being tolerant, which means still judging, just shutting up about it. And then once I let go of it, I said, you know what? You hurt your back recently. You haven't done Tai Chi in a long time. Just listen to this woman, what she has to say. And I recognized that the beginner mind, it was very valuable to me. And it didn't matter whether we were on the fourth move or the 21st move, or if I remembered them, or if I thought of myself advanced or not. There was value in learning and being aware of that movement and my body in space, and that is Tai Chi. So, the rest of it didn't matter. And so I equate that as a analogy to going back and not holding it, and going back and not holding your point of attention, is that there's value in noticing that without judgment. And if you're doing that, you're practicing mindfulness. If you are doing that, even if you're doing it all day, it's not like, oh shit, I'm still going back and forth. I'm still going back and forth. I've been doing this. How long I've been doing this? 4 years, 5 years? I don't know. How long have I been in the group? I still go back and forth, but I don't have the same perspective about it anymore, because there are times my fourth is up to step 6 and I can hold that for a while. And there are other days where it's not. It's going back and forth a lot more often, especially when I had pain or injury, or but the lowest hanging fruit is different, changes. And my acceptance of wherever I am that day, it's just like yoga, Jean, some days you can do tree pose like a redwood, and other days you can't even stand on your foot and you just go, oh, look at that, I'm off balance on my left side today. Or look, I'm kinked in this, like, so what? That's still yoga. You're still practicing. Like, it's the judgment of it that prevents the forward movement, or it prevents doing it in that moment. It prevents mindfulness by all the words that you have associated with progress or lack thereof, just the measurement of it. So beginner mind is really, I learned a lot about beginner mind lately.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think, you know, if I'm getting the picture that Jean is painting, it is, a little bit hectic. There is a lot of different stimuli occurring, and very little of it would be something that like you would choose. You just wake up and you're like, I'm going to choose this today. So it's not that. So what I've noticed is that in that type of situation, and we're still, navigating the first three techniques, is that so things are so moving so rapidly that I've lost my point of attention. I'm not holding anything, I'm not establishing anything. To go from not to just doing it is, again, maybe a way to look at it is like taking the mind from 500 miles an hour to zero. So when things are moving around really quickly, you may be able to check in, you may be able to say, okay, I'm going to emphasize this for a second, but then it goes away really quickly. And then it's just gone almost instantly. It feels like you checked in and then you just instantly checked right back out. So I get that feeling like I've spent so much time there that it's super familiar to me. And if somebody just dropped out of the sky and they say, well, just remember your point of attention or your lowest hanging fruit, I would be like, okay, screw you, thanks, that doesn't help. Because when things are moving rapidly like that, it doesn't help as much as the voice of power will. So interjecting the words, especially a mind like Gene's that's incredibly logical, I can imagine his voice of power is very sharp. It's very, this is the way it is type of voice.
I try to use the voice of power. I try to use the voice of power, and I doubt when it's hard for me to find anything that's true. Because I question everything. Everything that I come up with, I can find an exception to. So,
Mhm.
I get tossed around in arguing with myself, and then I get tired and I drop it. and the points of attention tend to be whatever commands my attention at the moment. I need to do this next and then this next, and so I'm in the moment. There's no question about it. It's not a moment it's not a moment I prefer,
Right.
but I'm there.
Mhm.
I'm there.
That's true.
It's not
It
a
is.
great place to be. I'm not finding it a great place to be.
No, and and we're all going to find ourselves in situations that are just not our choice. It's not going to be a good place to be, in a micro way, sitting in that dentist chair, but that's not a place I want to be. I don't want them sticking needles in my face. I don't want my mouth to be all droopy like that. I don't like the pain because you still feel certain things and it's not good at all. So, that's another time where I have to talk to myself. I have to remind myself. Now, if your devil's advocate is dominating the conversation, then we have to practice the voice of power. We have to talk, well, we have to. With this practice, it would be recommended that we reiterate times like right now. Right now it's not is tumultuous. It's, not as much as going on right in this moment. There's things that even there's some things that the devil's advocate cannot cut in and say anything about. For example, all of this is changing. Wherever I'm at right now, this is changing and I will not be in this situation forever. That's a fact. Like even if you end up transitioning to something new because space junk, you're still not going to be in that situation forever, right? Everything is always changing. So one of the voice of power is a practice. You practice the voice of power, and the voice of power is is just super sharp when it is directing back to the practice. But a way is that the voice of power is also super beneficial is reiterating these aspects of your life experience that to be true, such as everything is always changing. I think when I have a book that really outlines the principles even more, then you can really look at these principles because they reflect nature. And when you look at nature, you're like, okay, yeah, I don't really see myself arguing cycles. Cycles are different for different species, for different areas on Earth, but they're all going through a cycle. Even if you're smack dab in the middle of the equator and you don't have the change of seasons that we're used to, there's still seasons where there's more pollination than others. There's seasons where there's more moisture and more humidity than others. So it's going through cyclical changes. That's just one example, but
No,
yeah,
I like the idea. I need to get back to not what I believe or what I think, but what I know.
what you know. Yes.
Yeah,
Hmm.
the two things that I think I know, or maybe three things I think I know.
Yeah. Yeah. And so knowledge is an interesting thing. I'm not Socrates, because Socrates was just talking shit, trying to be humble. Socrates knew a great deal, but all that I know is that I know not is very philosophical. It is one of the three islands. It's not all three. The infinite, the finite, so when I talk about the island of the practical. But so, when we practice the voice of power, that is our opportunity to go ahead and talk to yourself. But knowledge will contain three things. At least this is one way to look at knowledge. It doesn't have to be the only way, but knowledge will include some sort of information. So my voice of power would kind of talk about the information that I have been exposed to. One day I was talking to myself through the voice of power intentionally on purpose about the nervous system. My nervous system doesn't know the difference. I've read that. I've seen that in a book, but I've also empirically, I felt that. I have felt that when I think about the tiger in the room, my nervous system responds as if that tiger's really in the room. But then I've also, I've heard Donna's experiences, I've heard other people's experiences. That's the three parts of knowledge that my voice of power can reiterate. So it's not just now remove those three things and you have belief, you have faith, you have these things, because there's nothing really for us to look at and say, oh, okay, there's the three aspects of knowledge. Now I can remember that and apply it unto wisdom. It's more difficult to apply belief unto wisdom, which is why you need faith, which is just like the leveled up version of belief. But the reason that we need these assured expectations is because we're still trying to convince ourselves. We're still trying to prove it to ourselves. Because if you really believed something, it would never come to your mind. You would never convince it to other people. You wouldn't need the word faith. We create these words because, it's not really there. It's not really happening, but we still have to have a concept around what is happening. So we call it belief. We call it faith. The voice of power isn't really the way that I describe the voice of power. First of all, the reason it's a voice of power is because you're giving it your deliberate attention. When we give something our deliberate attention, it becomes a ... of power. When you give your dreams attention, it becomes a dream of power. When you have visions and you're aware in the vision, you're present, you're mindful, you're giving it your attention, you now have a vision of power. We have a waking scape, the waking environment that we're existing in right now. When we give it our deliberate attention, all of a sudden we have a waking scape of power where now it's charged. It's the energy is flowing between the three islands and the infinite and the finite and all of that. So one thing that I did is I really sharpened my voice of power through notes, through rereading books, through, I would write things down on my cell phone. I would talk to people. I would use chalkboards. I would use whiteboards, and I would constantly but then I would write something one of those days and it's just like, well, now I've never seen that myself. So, for example, when we talk about I'm sending you energy, oh, I love that. That sounds so nice. But now let's look at that for a second. If we're talking about energy that we can feel, that we can interact with, we're talking about something that is at least partially three-dimensional, to some extent, because we're interacting with it, right? And if it's not, that's another thing, but let's just assume for a second. So is it just not, in cahoots with the laws of thermodynamics now? So now we're talking about this mysterious energy that can violate every other single law of the universe, and now all of a sudden that makes sense. So, empathic. I'm taking on your energy. Okay, cool. That sounds nice. I'll put that on the island of possibility, but what's the mechanism for that? Where's the sensory organ that is absorbing your energy? Where does the energy go? Where does the energy store? How does the energy no? And so my mind is like, well, you have no empirical evidence for that. Nobody has ever really given you a good explanation of how that works, and you're not coming up with a fucking thing logical about taking on someone else's emotion. What does sound more logical, what does make more sense, is that the factors, we create our own emotion that's similar to the other person based on vibrational factors, energy factors, if you will, but also chemical factors. We're constantly spewing hormones and chemicals into the air that we can't see, and other people can pick up on that. And when there's more people involved in it, then the whole room is sending out those chemicals, and you walk into a room and you're like, I could cut this tension with a knife. You know what I mean? So that's something that could potentially be beneficial for you in the way that your mind works as well.
Right. It's replicating what you see. Yeah, I don't see it as sending energy. I see it as putting my attention on what you're feeling, and then I replicate it,
And you replicate it. Yes. And the great thing about the way that you just said it is you replicated it. So now that means that's your responsibility, and it's still something that you can do with it. If somebody is just shooting their energy into my brain, I got to be like, hey, stop that. Stop that. I don't want you to do that. Stop that. So, and now again, maybe that's possible. I put it on the island of possible, but it does not fit with my 3. So that's not something my voice of power is ever going to say a thing about. My voice of power will never come in and say, hey, Ernest, be careful that Gene doesn't send you his energy, because it doesn't stack up for me. And so the reason I'm mentioning this is because you can start to go over the things that do stack up for you, such as change, such as momentum, such as some of the principles of balance. You mentioned balance at the beginning of the group study because you feel that you're not in balance. You can feel it. So one of the things that's empirical, like you can feel it empirically in your own experience. You know what balance feels like. You know what balance doesn't feel like. That's a theory of mine, that we know what this feels like, and other people confirm it. Now we have theoretical data, so we have other people that tell us that empirically in our own experience we can see that, but then we can also logically start to add it up, and it 1 + 1 will equal 2, and we're like, okay, this makes sense. So one thing that I would recommend, not just for you, but for anybody who's practicing this practice, is that most of us are going from thinking almost all the time. And the first 3 pillars doesn't just instantly stop that. I've never really recommended that. Instead, we develop the voice of power. It points back to our practice, but it also reiterates the logic, deduction, and other aspects of our cognition that are relative to the present moment, or just, relative to our practice that we can reiterate and talk to ourselves about. So there's some things on my cell phone, the note cards I would read that stuff every day, same stuff. But it's like, oh shit, like, yeah, that's right. I am this, or I am that, and this note card really does stack up. It does make sense. Or I have a note card and I'm comparing it to experience, and I'm like, wait a second. Well, now that does no, this one doesn't make sense. Crumple it up, throw it away. That's not stacking up to my voice of power right now. I just threw it in the trash can of possibility. It's not impossible. It's not, I'm not just buying what you're selling. I'm putting it in the maybe and maybe not, So developing the voice of power is a practice, and it's one of the practices that I highly recommend early on. And you can do it how you see fit, although I do see consistencies in terms of writing it down, writing quotes down, because you said that there's only 2 or 3 things that you believe, and I think you're being humble, and that's very nice. And philosophically, I get it, because I only know one thing for sure, and that's the direction of my attention in this moment. Everything else could have been a part of an elaborate computer program that just started 2 seconds ago. I don't know. So all my memories could have instantly been implanted into my mind, and this is all a simulation. True, true, true. But the one thing I know for sure in this moment is what my mind is selecting and choosing to emphasize apart from the present moment's myriad of potential stimuli. Does that make sense? So developing your voice of power, I think, is a critical aspect of the first three pillars of this practice.
I think it's really useful. And Gene is a lot like you in that he needs evidence-based things in his own experience. He, as much as he can trust somebody and believe them, it doesn't matter. If he doesn't have his own personal experience with that, it doesn't exist. And he recently had a trip, he was sending us pictures and showing us the pictures when they were on the water and the canoe and the beautiful vistas that he had, and he noticed a significant difference in the way he felt and the direction of his mind in that atmosphere, and even made the comment of, okay, now how do I bring that with me? And I think everything you just said, Ernest, is the way that you do that. The things that I know, to be sure, I can argue with myself about all these concepts and all these steps and even my ability to get there, but I do, nature is one of those things, is that it's a constant that I know. And so for me, I use rapid redirection when I'm not successful, when I find myself getting noisy in my head and I'm arguing with myself, or I'm trying to find my practice. And so I go walk to the beach now. Usually getting outside and back into nature is a low-hanging fruit for me, because those are knowns that can be felt right away. The sun, the temperature, something about when I'm stuck in the house and there's media around, or there's whatever, and I'm in some habitual, repetitive, not finding that place of a present moment. Just getting outside, even just to go to the store and run an errand, and the light hits you and you're outside, it changes my the feeling that I have, and it makes my lower hanging fruit just more visible to me, and therefore my voice of power is right there with that.
Sorry, Neo's interrupting you. He's hungry. Oh no, he needs to go outside.
Talking about nature, Dad.
I know,
could use
right?
a little nature right now.
Yeah. Even though he can't see it because it's still dark outside, but he can smell it. That's the key. All right, so I think all of that really makes sense, and the way that I have everything organized now, I could kind of show you. So at the top of the organizational chart, we have a method, the primary method. Everything comes from this, and we know what it is. It's the third pillar. Now, that would take some time to teach somebody, so this isn't necessarily the way that it's taught. It's just more the way that we're talking about the structure of it, So the third pillar is fundamentally the methodology. It's the method behind everything. And the third pillar is also the third technique, to maintain emphasis on the present moment. That's the embodiment factor. Mindfulness-based stress relief, things like that, they're wonderful, but it's one of those things that they just want to focus on when things aren't going right. You're about to go into the meeting with your boss. You're about to, someone's yelling at you. Let's do some mindfulness-based stress relief. Fine. I think that's great. It's not going to have the third pillar as its primary method because it's not an embodiment. Usually it's not being presented as an embodiment thing. So the third pillar makes it embodiment, and everything, absolutely everything will lead back to that. Does that make sense? So everything else that we do, everything else that we talk about, it all leads back to that. So from the method or the methodology, and I guess I could put that in parentheses too, of what is the three pillars in this picture is the method. And then the method is going to lead to, make a little bar here. So from the method, it all leads back to that, but now we're going to branch out into the rest of the practice. And the practice is fundamentally going to require technique. And that's 6 techniques. So from these 6 techniques, and I could make it nicer someday, like this chart, but it is what it is now. But from the 6 techniques come individual practices. Oops, I hit caps. So in order to have a practice, we have to have techniques. And the techniques will be a reflection of the method. So the method drives the techniques drive all of the different individual practices. An example of an individual practice, fox walking. Fox walking is going to contain, to some extent or another, those 6 techniques. Depends on how long you've been fox walking and like where you're at in your practice. You know, it could still just involve, here I am in this moment, I am present, and then you forget, and then, you know, 14 steps later, you're like, oh, okay, back. I'm present again. I'm going to talk to myself. It's a beautiful day. I'm doing my practice. Today's the day that I maintain more attention on the moment. And then you forget, and then you come back to your practice later. So it's fine. The way that we look at fox walking, the way that we look at these practicing the voice of power, that's a separate practice. I have about 30 practices, 30 different practices, all 30 or so, or whatever I have on these 3 pages of practices. It all goes back to those 6 techniques, all goes back to that one method, and all of the practices are the bridge mindfulness system. So a system is a bundle of practices. A practice is a bundle of tools. The individual tools will lead back to the techniques. Does that make sense? So paying attention to the sky, that's a tool. That's not necessarily a practice in itself, unless you just decide to make it that, I don't know, but and then format it, I don't know. But for the most part, these individual things that were the individual tools, the tricks of attention, they will organize themselves, especially when you have a bundle of them that seem to relate. They'll start to bundle in a relationship to a practice. And the practice will contain one of those, if not all of those 6 techniques. And all of those techniques reflect learning to maintain deliberate engagement and emphasis on the present moment. Does that make sense? So no matter what, I'll continue to probably, and other people will also continue to add practices. And the practices, if they reflect the 6 techniques and the method, it's bridge mindfulness system. Because that's pretty unique to what we're doing in the way that we've organized it. So there's a wide variety of even Tai Chi, the way that I'm, you know, giving or sharing Tai Chi. It contains all 6 of those techniques. It all leads back to the 3rd pillar because it's a mindfulness way of doing Tai Chi. Does that make sense? And at the ultimate stage of Tai Chi, there is no thought. We're not comparing, we're not contrasting, it's not right, it's not wrong. We're focusing on the 4 directions. And if you focus on the 4 directions, there's literally no room for idle thought because there's so much feeling. There's so much feeling coming from the present moment. So the first 3 pillars are designed to create space in the overall amount of thinking. When you hear pillars, also think techniques because they're the same thing. Also think principles, because there's principles that create the technique. And so there's principles that create the pillars that create the technique. They're a reflection of one another, but I can talk about them in a variety of ways. The next 3 pillars are designed to navigate, to explore the space that you've created in your mind. Because it's like, all right, I got a clear mind for a little while. Well, now what? Do I just wait for the Heisman Trophy to come in the mail, or, you know, what do I do? So I have sort of designed practices around the other 3 pillars, such as the 4 directions. Each practice will fit snugly into one of those 3 techniques because they focus on different things. For example, the redirection technique will fit snugly into the 3rd pillar or that 3rd technique, because how do you maintain your emphasis? You use the voice of power and the redirection technique to keep coming back to the present moment. So that's the perfect time really to offer that type of thing. Does that make sense? And then it will also fit to the 4 categories of the bridge practice, which is foundational, and then we have counterbalance, warrior training, hydrostasy. So if I talk about the 4 directions, that's hydrostasy. If I talk about maybe we talk about redirection, that's going to fall into counterbalance. If I talk about the traps of thinking, that's going to fall into warrior training. If I say, well, what is attention? Attention is the ability that your mind has to emphasize from the available data and stimuli that you're experiencing. Perception, things like cognition, I define all of these words. The body is and the mind are perceiving beyond what you're capable of recognizing at all times. So you select from what you have available to you, but you're never paying attention to everything you have available to you, which is why in psychology we have above and below. And when I say the word consciousness, I mean recognition, the mind's ability to recognize above or below what it is experiencing. The human mind, in average, on most common, operates the majority of its day below recognition. The mind is not actively recognizing, it is a habitual condition form of recognizing the present moment, and it requires memory to do so. Take a person's memory away, and all of their conditioned habits are going to change. We've seen this. We've seen people who have lost their memories. Their likes change, their dislikes change, their hopes change, their dreams change. They don't have the same memories that they used to that drove that. The totality of their experience has basically just been reset to a certain extent. So everything can change in that they may not love the person they loved before. They'll look at their kids and be like, well, who the fuck are you? Like, I don't feel any, I don't know who you are. That type of thing. But then again, they might be, but I do kind of feel something strange coming from my heart space when I look at you. Now that could be the energy pull. Again, my inner guru is not convinced on certain things yet. And my inner guru doesn't require just one of these 3. You know how some people say, well, you got to have evidence. You're the evidence type of mind. Well, no, not necessarily. I all 3. Is it even logical? Can I even say this sentence in my mind without going, that doesn't make any sense at all? If the answer is no, then it doesn't stack up to one of the 3. If I don't have any personal experience, it doesn't stack up to one of the 3. If I don't have anybody else giving me examples, I have none of the 3. I'm going to put that on the island of, yeah, maybe, which is still different than what some minds do, which is like, no, that can't be true because, humans can't jump off buildings and fly. I'm going to put that in the island of, yeah, maybe, but in terms of the 3 aspects of knowledge, I would agree that a human being will not jump off of a building and fly based on those 3. But I don't want my entire experience to be based on those 3. I have to leave room for possibility. So I put it on the island of, yeah, maybe, who knows, it could, I don't know. I'll wait for more information to pop up, or I'll have the personal experience myself, or Donna will give me a vivid representation of her experience that reflects what we're talking about. So at least I can get some of the parts of knowledge in place. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Yeah.
It all really makes sense. But while I was listening to you, it all fits together and it all builds upon each other, and it all absolutely makes sense to me. And you have really boiled it down to an explainable package that is, I can't find any I can't find any yeah buts in there. And then, but
That's
what
good.
I think,
But then she said, but.
and what I think about when you're saying it is the motivation for me. It can, the fact that it is so logical makes me believe. It makes it easy for me to believe that it's accessible to me. And the motivation to do it is, 1, how important is this to me to do? Or 2, how necessary is it for me to do? Like, what do I get out of this? Like, what's in it for me, kind of thing. How important is this, and what's in it for me? And I immediately immediately remember in the beginning that a lot of my issues were all up in my head and my feelings, and I wasn't happy or comfortable, or I was in battle with, it was emotional stuff. It was emotional, and then the physical aspects of emotional stuff. And I noticed recently that because I had acute major health issues. I hurt my back pretty badly, and it affected everything that I could do or was able to do. And I immediately got shingles right after that. I had shingles across my back, and I had shingles down my arm. So it's a lot of pain. It was a very intrusive, dominant thing was my physical condition. And I recall saying in the beginning of this practice, gee, I'm either in my head or I'm in my body, but those are two separate things. Like when I'm meditating and I'm doing my earthy, crunchy stuff, I'm really feel good in that space. But how do I can't live there. I have a real life and real things that need to be done. And when I'm in, my body's hurting or I'm sick or whatever, that's just like, I always found an excuse, like Eugene was saying, he was arguing in his mind. Like, well, it's easy for Ernest to do this because Shane is working and he's home and he can do all this mindfulness stuff. He's not going to a job, and he's not, I could find all the arguments of why it was easy for you and hard for me. Now listening to this and doing this practice and all of that, and then having these health issues happen to me, I realize that when I am in my body, it's easier for me to do the practice. I can make the excuse of, well, I'm in pain and the pain is distracting and I can't do my woofy, crunchy, earthy, crunchy mindfulness things because I've got this fucking back pain. What am I going to do? And I realized that because I've been practicing and the momentum that I have in that, and because I have experienced the why it's important and the benefit and the relief of practicing, I'm going to use the practice to navigate my back injury and my shingles. And being in my body made me much, much more mindful. I spent my days thinking about everything I put in my mouth because I wanted it to be, I didn't want to take any more drugs. I have side effects to drugs. They don't help me. And then I got to take more medicine because of the side effects of the last medicine that I took. And I'm not interested in going down that road in this older chapter of my existence, which many older people do. They end up with 28 medications. And so I was so mindful of how my body felt, not judging it like, oh shit, I hurt my back and I shouldn't have done that, and telling the story of it. And, what's going to relieve this spasm? I have a bunch of tools I can do for that because I'm a nurse and I've traversed this before, and I bought every contraption known to mankind and they all exist in my house, and I can do this. And there are YouTubes with my favorite physical therapists. I'm going to do that. And what about anti-inflammatory foods and what I know about oils and what I know about as food, as medicine? My body, this too shall pass. I will traverse these issues, and how I traverse these issues will also determine how quickly I go through it, how I feel mentally about it, and the chemicals I release as a result of that. And so I'm going to spend every moment, and I'm retired now. I have no excuses. I don't have to be anywhere at any time. I don't have to do anything but attend to my body and my mind in impeccable ways. And I have everything that you just explained. I have all my steps and I have all my tools, and I can pick them, and I can rapidly redirect to a good location. I have everything around me that I need to do to navigate this in the smoothest, most elegant way possible. And I found that even though I had a lot of physical pain, shingles is painful. Like, it's so painful. And this back injury was so painful, but it just was what is. I really just was what is, and I knew it was going to end because I wasn't accepting anything other than that. And I was going to get through this day. And so I used everything I knew about oils and everything I knew about food, and the farmer's market happened right there, and everything I put in my body and my water intake and everything. And I traversed um, a bunch of things happening to me at one time that could have led down a different, I could have had a lot of momentum with the negative part of that, mentally and physically, or medically taking medicines, doing what the doctors wanted me to do, which I didn't do. Um, and the practice, everything you just I was in my body the whole time. I had no other choice. My body commanded my attention. And so I was like, okay, I be partnered with it. Let's navigate this. How am I going to navigate this with everything that I've learned, the totality of my understanding at this point in time? And that was just a decision. What all the tools were there. And I'm saying that because as you were explaining this to Gene, I know this about Gene. Like, I know him. I've watched him do this. I've watched him traverse lung cancer. I've watched him, traverse Crohn's disease. I've watched him become a yoga teacher. I've watched him change from a type A personality to, somebody who manages the way that he thinks in a way that served him better. So I don't know. I know that I know the feeling of being lost, but it's not really true. It's just not true. He's not lost. He's got all of those tools, and he knows. I've watched him follow a macrobiotic diet, and doctors go to him, "Oh my God, if I didn't see your guts before, I would have said you were misdiagnosed by another doctor." So I know he knows what to do. He's got all of that in him and the voice of power. So, because I watched him do it and I went to this class, I can do it for myself. So I want to remind him of that.
Mm-hmm.
Want to remind him that it's not as far away as he's convinced himself that it is. It's a
Yeah,
low-hanging fruit for him. He just forgot that it is.
right. And I think evidence that Gene knows that is that Gene is here. So
Right.
this, being in this meeting right now is a practice. It is a coming together, talking about, each of us talking about what we're doing and how we're navigating. I have a dentist appointment to go through. The clinic is on a financial downturn. Everybody's on a financial downturn right now. It's getting um, a little bit difficult for certain sectors of the economy or whatever. So, there's always things that we're going to be navigating. And I think one of the things that we learn in this practice is the Tai Chi mind and the nature of momentum. So some of the situations that we're talking about, some of the circumstances that we're talking about, they have varying degrees of momentum. And varying degrees of momentum will require varying degrees of practice and redirection. So it sounds like the degree of momentum that Gene and others are navigating, it's not a little type of momentum. It's got some strength to it. The transition to something new has strength to it. When it's people that you know and you've known for a long time, that's all going to have strength to it. And we know that it's a proportionate type of thing. So if there's more momentum, but we don't emphasize the practice to meet that momentum, eventually the practice will get drowned out until we remember again, and that's kind of how it goes. But yeah, I think one of the things that Donna mentioned, and this is how it fits into my 3 parts of knowledge. And the reason I like the 3 parts of knowledge is because now I can say I know something. I don't have to be Socrates and try to flatter people and say I know nothing. No, I know anything that can align with those 3 things. And so one of the things that Donna was talking about is the ability to pay attention to the mind and the body, and how those are actually 2 different things. And I would say, though, that when the voice of power is being implemented, we're interacting with our mind deliberately, just like you would be interacting with your body deliberately. So even though you're talking to yourself, you've chosen that. That is a direction of your mind in the present moment. It's on purpose, it's deliberate, you're present while you're doing it. You're not necessarily labeling and judging everything around you. You're using your voice of power to reiterate something that you've chosen to reiterate, something that you've chosen to focus on. And the reason this is important, because that is the difference between belief and knowing. Because these are words that we use in the island of the practical all the time, but we don't have any clear differentiation for it. So if I have to use belief or faith, I don't have all three aspects of knowledge.
Right.
So I don't know, I wouldn't say that I know something. However, if I have all three aspects of those knowledge, of those aspects of knowledge, I now know it. Belief never comes up. I reiterate myself what I know, but it's not as if the devil's advocate is involved anymore, because the devil's advocate's already lost the debate. The devil's advocate is most interactive when you don't have the three aspects of knowledge in place. And so the devil's advocate's going to be like, well, logically, that doesn't make sense. Or, well, you've never experienced anything even remotely like that. How could that be a part of your truth? Or, just using Donna because she has her, but she experiences all kinds of things, that I've never experienced. They don't sound too logical. Is she now a reliable source? That's kind of where the devil's advocate comes in, because it's still evaluating belief and faith and what we think we know or what we want to know or anything like that. It's a completely different energy, though, when the three aspects of knowledge are in place, because it's like, where are you, devil's advocate? And the devil's advocate's sitting in a chair over there like, what are you talking about? Like, you logically understand what's going on. You have information to support it. You've experienced it yourself. And Donna just got done talking about it without being, led or we're not going that direction. She took it that direction on her own. For example, talking about the that's two of the different directions is in the body and into the mind. Those are two different avenues that you can actually maintain simultaneously, as per our discussion at the beginning. That is the mind just alternating back and forth quickly? If you're using just one direction, then you probably are alternating back and forth quickly in that one direction. I'm alternating quickly between paying attention to the moon over there and paying attention to the computer. I'm kind of alternating a little bit back and forth because it's using the same direction. So that's where I came up with the 4 directions of attention to kind of, well, what can I maintain simultaneously, as opposed to, and rapidly going back and forth is good. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but there is a difference between holding 2 or 3 things and alternating back and forth between 3 things. Subtle difference, but different, So, but Donna just confirmed it in a manner of speaking without being led towards that discussion, because she herself said, it feels as if there's a difference when my attention is going into my body and when my attention is going into cognition, just cognition, not even necessarily thought, but imagination or logic or deduction, reasoning. Those types of things occur from our cognitive space, our brain space. And yes, they all work together, but that's, we're separating things so that we can work with them. So now that stacks up even more to the 3 parts of knowledge, because Donna independently confirmed the result, without me mentioning it, because we talked about that before Donna was here when we talked about, the different directions. So now it's logical. It's logical that the mind can pay attention to these different avenues of attention at the same time. So that logic, so devil's advocate sitting over there, and it's like, I don't know, it adds up logically. So I got nothing right now. And then I'm like, but I can also experience it. I can do it right now. And then devil's advocate sitting over there like, okay, yeah, you are doing that. And then Donna just independently verified it through a separate conversation, and the devil advocate's like, all right, I'm leaving. Like, I got nothing right now. Now that is something that I can reiterate to myself throughout the day. I can say, Ernest, you can maintain multiple points of attention. It just requires your focus, the unbending desire to feel peace, but you can do it. Connect, emphasize, maintain emphasis. That's one of my most important mantras these days, is to deliberately choose the direction of my attention because I'm already present, and then to emphasize an aspect of that, and then to maintain that emphasis as I continue to go through. Those are the 3 steps. Those are also the pillars, the principles. They reflect one another. That is deliberate modulation, sensing energy, and Oh, we have so much to talk about when it comes with the act of allowing, because the act of allowing is how does one karma yoga. Karma yoga gets a little bit weird because it includes dharma or right action, and now we start to get into morals and all of that kind of stuff. And so it gets a little bit weird. But if we remove all of that, what you should be doing according to other people, what you shouldn't be doing according to other people, dharma, morals, remove all that, and we have just pure intention and pure will without psychology, without the psychological component, because our mind is quiet. When the mind is quiet, you now have intention, you have the power of will that will just flow from intention, typically follows a desire of some sort. And our will is so that we can bring that desire into fruition. The big difference, though, is that we're not churning in our psychology about it. We're just, and we call that just do energy. And before you know it, somebody says, well, Ernest, why are you writing a blog? And you're like, because I can. What do you expect from that blog? Well, I follow principles, so if it accumulates momentum, it's going to grow into something. I don't know what, but because I don't read the future, I have a plan, and the plan is to do my blog article every Wednesday. That's my plan. And then it's like, well, so what do you expect to get from that? Well, I look at principles in terms of expectation, because that's the best way for me to predict what could potentially happen is in principle. The principle is if I do this every Wednesday, it's going to add up. If I keep giving it my attention and my focus, it's going to add up even further. And before you know it, I have a very robust whatever it is I'm creating. But I didn't do it with a cognitive focus on desire and result, which is it's a lag. It's not necessary. It's the opposite of ebb and flow. I'm now including the word ebb with the word flow. Joshua Grant got to me and he's like, everything is flow, 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 flow. And I'm like, And then this is a good example. So Josh was talking to me, and then my devil's advocates, it piqued its interest. It's like, oh, wait a second. Flow, ebb, they require one another to exist. So what are we talking about here? How do you always have flow? And I'm like, shit. I don't always experience flow. I've never met anybody who's in a constant, uninterrupted state of impeccable flow. And it doesn't logically make sense that you would have the flow with no ebb at all. And then I'm like, maybe that's my hydrostasy circle. It's not, we don't want to have no ebb and just flow, or just ebb and no flow. We want it to be as balanced as possible so it's not tumultuous and we stay inside of our hydrostasy bubble. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. My shingles and back pain could have been seen as ebb and as obstacle to my practice. And
Challenge. Yeah.
instead of, I was like, okay, this is what is. This is the space junk that fell from the sky. It's just called a bulging disc and shingles. I don't care what you call it. I don't care if you call it unicorns and fairies. I don't call if you care if you call it cancer. This is what is the space junk that fell from the sky, and how am I going to choose how am I going to navigate my practice with those knowns? And those knowns don't have to have a label, and they don't have to mean I have been good at my practice or bad at my practice, or that I'm successful or a failure, or that I'm in ebb or I'm in flow. I just am. So so really, even when I would have it turn over in bed at night, and just the sheets against the shingles woke me up and was excruciating. I had to change my position, and I'm like, oh, and I had no rash or anything. You could just feel, it was like this magic pain that came on my arm, but I knew what it was because I had it elsewhere. And then I would change my position, and then I would notice the temperature of the sheet, the softness of the pillow. I like the flatter pillow under my head and the fluffier pillow between my knees. Like, where are they? I could feel for them in the night and know where they were. I could have appreciation, not yay yahoo appreciation. I've got fucking shingles and a bulging disc. I'm not dancing here. But it became a dance and a practice, just like it does when I have no pain. It's just, I'm navigating this, and there just happens to be these factors involved. So where is my body alignment? Even laying in bed, where is my alignment? Where's my golden line? Where's my breath? you know, feel the cool breeze coming in the window, fall back asleep.
Mhm.
Like, it's still my practice. It's my practice all the time. And then when I'm doing that, there is that space that you just talked about, and it's not or mind or body. It is kind of it's both. Being in my body helps me to be more aware of where I'm placing my mind, because I have lived for so long. This is my experience, Donna's experience. I've lived so long in either place and not overlapping the two in any way. I was in one or I was in the other. And now I have techniques and tools and a practice at my disposal. And when I do it, I feel more flow. The pain isn't gone. It just has it doesn't command the way I move through the day.
Mhm.
It's just, I move with it through the day.
Mhm.
And consequently, it diminishes because my mind relaxes and I get different chemicals in my brain. I have that space for inspiration. I remember my oils, or I look up something on the computer and these are the 7 anti-inflammatory foods. And I know that, but I'm like, oh, I never knew that those 7 were the hot because of the polyphenols or the whatever. I write them down. What can I make out of that? I'm going to make chili. I'm going to make this soup with all of these things. And then I'm going to practice that. I'm going to go shop in the store for those fruits. And I'm going to, like, that's going to be my day, is navigating with all my principles in place. And where's my golden line? And where's my breath? And where's my feet on the floor? But I want mineral water. I want to drink all mineral water today, and I want to put these oils in my black coffee. And I don't know. I'm doing it all. It's not just mind. It's not just body. It's not just practice. It's the dance between them all, whether I have shingles or I'm at a party. It's the same. It's the
Mhm.
same now. It's similar.
Well, you lost me at putting oils in your coffee. I really don't think that we should be putting anything in coffee other than cream and sugar. So,
I don't use cream or sugar.
you know how people are putting like mushroom dust and stuff in their coffee? It's like,
They're using mushroom as coffee. You know,
that
I
sounds
put my oils in because
awful.
I'm intermittent fasting and I only have a 4-hour window to consume. So I got to get it in where I can get it right now.
That makes sense. Yeah.
That may change.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. So, one of the things, and then I can share the 4 directions. So I can share that right before we go. What is the 4 directions? You can work with it. You can kind of experiment with it. So you're devil's advocate, how does it feel? Incidentally, Gene, the reason for the 4 directions is because there's something in my practice that the devil's advocate is like screaming at me at, and I just accept it. It's okay. I don't mind. But
The
I
islands
can
help
explain that.
also. The
The
islands help
islands do help.
because I
Yeah.
have thoughts, and instead of arguing about those thoughts, I'll just put it on that island.
Oh, sure. Okay.
That
Yeah.
really does help me.
The island of possibility. So I would organize the islands into its own practice. It's just a nice way to look at things. But I'll say one thing that I'm learning is when the body is in a state of physical suffering, whether it's a drill in your mouth, whether it's a disc, whether you're experiencing things throughout aging process, or you're young and you just sprained your ankle because you were trying to do too much. For me, the voice of power is so important. So when my eyes are closed, they're putting this thing into my face, it hurts. It's important for me to tell myself what I know, that this dental procedure is going to benefit me. Millions of people have a similar dental procedure all across the world in this moment right now, and they're all going to be fine. You're going to be fine too, Ernest. Just relax. So I'm talking to myself, and I'm doing my practice, because talking to myself in a deliberate and intentional way is one of the potential 4 directions. So here's the 4 directions, and I can explain why talking to yourself is one of those 4, if it's deliberate, if it's intentional, and if it's on purpose, of course. If it's not, then you're just back into a habitual state. So the 4 directions of inner peace, of mindfulness, of the bridge system. This is hydrostasy, by the way. It will be more accessible, because now you can interact with the 4 directions at any time, any one of the 4 directions. I'm maintaining all four. And there's a reason I'm doing that. So, and I don't want that to be a stumbling block. Someone's like, oh, you know, all four, I need to, I'm exploring. So I'm having some fun with this and I'm doing my thing. And it doesn't mean that you should or shouldn't or should be able to or shouldn't be. I don't know. I don't want to get into all of that because that's a lot of comparing and
Too
contrasting.
late, you already mentioned it. Now Jean's gonna want to do all
I
four.
know, yeah. But the comparing and the contrasting with one being better and one being worse, that's not the case. If you have one direction of attention active, it's just as good as anything else. We don't have to look at it as better or worse. And if you're doing any amount of your practice, you're using the directions, even though I've never explained it that way. The reason I use the four directions is because if I am paying attention to my environment and I'm now paying attention to shadows, and I also want to pay attention to circles, it's like there's shadows and now there's a circle. Oh, and then there's shadows and then there's a circle. There's a circle and then there's shadow. I'm going back and forth. I can go back and forth very rapidly, and it almost seems like I'm holding both points of attention. I'm not. I can feel the rapid back and forthness, just like a computer when it's maintaining similar operations. So remember, I used to talk about maintaining multiple points of attention. I know that this is possible, but the way that I was doing it, devil's advocate was coming up and saying, I actually think, Ernest, you're just alternating rapidly. And I'm like, well, that's okay. And then devil's advocate was like, yes, of course, that's okay. You're still doing your practice. There's nothing wrong with that. But then I'm like, well, I want to be able to maintain multiple points of attention to see what happens. What happens when I'm doing multiple things at the same time? And that's where the four directions come from, because they're not crossing streams. They're using different things in a manner of speaking. So you can do all four of these at the same time, or two of them at the same time, or however you want to do it. So the first one is introspective attention, attention on the body, attention inwards, your bones, your muscles. What could be included, it's not loose, because where do you feel emotion? You feel it in your body. This is the reason that traditional Chinese medicine will associate emotion to certain organs, because when you're nervous, you feel butterflies in your stomach. When you have heartache, your chest hurts. It's like there's a reason that we're using these physical places in our body to associate to suffering, because there's an association in the body there for whatever reason. I'm sure modern science will start to show that, different areas of our body are producing different chemicals than others. And maybe that's the reason we feel it more here than we do there. And it will all make sense. But sensing into your body is its own thing. You're using your central nervous system or your peripheral nervous system in cahoots with the central nervous system, and now your nervous system is sensing your own physicality. That's one of the four directions. Does that make sense? And then I'll explain the secret fifth direction and why I can't include it, because the devil's advocate won't let me. Not yet. Okay, so I can do that while simultaneously engaging my senses. The five senses is what we would call our interaction with the outside world. Spoiler alert, you are not directly interacting with the outside world. You are merely responding to your brain's interpretation of what it is able to take in from what we view as the outside world. Does that make sense? The moment you decide to go and grab the cup, everything is already, you're just processing it. You're just recognizing the process, the accumulation of the perception, if that makes sense, right? So Gene thinks he's looking directly into the computer and he's seeing it now. He's seeing it on an ever so slight delay because it has to enter your eye. Your brain has to recognize it. It has to organize the information. Our brains do two things really well. More things, of course, but keeps you safe and organizes things to keep you safe. It wants to organize things to keep you safe. Bottom line. The more it's organized, it's like, okay, Gene isn't a bear. I'm going to put him in the I don't need to think about Gene as a threat category, right? Gene can turn into a bear. All of a sudden, my brain is like, he's in the potential threat category. We need to keep an eye on him because he can turn into a bear. Does that make sense? That's how our brains work. Your brain wants to keep you safe. You can practice those first two directions of attention simultaneously. I can pay attention to the little camera. I'm looking at it. I'm engaging it. I see the green, the red, the black. I am also paying attention to my body simultaneously. I'm not rapidly going back and forth. I am maintaining both at the same time because they're operating on two different things. One's using my peripheral nervous system, the other is using my sensory organs and the central nervous system to communicate the perception, the interaction with the sensory organs. A sensory organ is your eye. Light is interacting with the sensory organ of your eye. You feel something on your skin. Those are sensory organs, the sensory organ of your skin, and you're able to feel temperature, for example, is different than the pressure on your skin. But we're able to sense that. That information is sent via the central nervous system to our brain. Our brain perceives it, compiles it, organizes it, and now you have what you call perception, your perception. Does that make sense? So you can play with those first two because you can do both at the same time. Cognition is the third direction of attention. You can think a thought or anything with cognition while looking at the stimuli, because now I'm using vision as my direction of attention and my body all at the same time. I can do all three of those. I can think a thought. That is a black object that I'm looking at. I'm looking at the object while talking, which is deliberate cognition, but I'm also sensing my body at the exact same. I still feel my feet. I still feel my body position in space and time. I can do all three of those directions simultaneously. Does that make sense? And then the fourth direction of attention is breath, because breath is connected to the autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. So we can choose when we want to do it, or we can just go back to default and it can do it on its own. So now we're interacting with other aspects of the nervous system that aren't necessarily involved when we're doing other things. So I can look at this black thing that I'm looking at, my camera. I can talk about its features, which means that I'm paying attention to it, like in the world, I'm talking about it. My cognition is now connected with it because I'm talking about its features. I have never left my body, and because I'm talking, it's a weird way of paying attention to breath, but I put attention on my throat so I can kind of feel the words as they're coming. That's breathing. I am breathing. It's just talk breathing. If I don't talk, now I'm just going to focus on the smoothness of my breathing. My mind is talking out the features of the object I'm looking at, and I still feel my body in space and time. I have all four directions of attention active. And I'm not alternating back and forth rapidly. I'm maintaining all four simultaneously because they're not crossing streams, our brain and body stream, if that makes sense. The wires aren't crossed. Focusing on my phone while focusing on shadows over there, those wires cross a little bit. We're kind of doing the same direction of attention. It's just going in different I'm splitting that and I'm alternating rapidly between them. Does that make sense? So the four directions of attention has a derivative, and it's the fifth direction, and it's the direction I can't talk about. When all four of these directions are active for long enough, all of the other aspects that I talk about come out naturally, such as the spirit, the essence of the moment. Oh, but then there's devil's advocate. What's sensing the essence, Ernest? All of it? I don't know, like everything in collaboration? Well, what's processing it? Is it a sensory organ? Is it electrochemical, physiological, hormonal response that you're feeling? Or are you feeling spirit? Yes, devil's advocate, I don't know. I don't really have the information to support why I can feel spirit. I do have empirical evidence, and I don't know what other people are talking about. So I don't even know if I have that part of it. People talk about a wide variety of things. I don't know what the hell they're talking about. So I don't even think I have that bit of the knowledge. So I don't have logic other than energy interacts with energy. How does it do that? I don't know. What's the mechanism? I don't know. I'm also not worried about it. If you've noticed, I'm not trying to figure that out. It doesn't matter. If something presents itself and all of a sudden there's information that I can support for feeling spirit, feeling the unknown, feeling the infinite, feeling all the magic, Ida, well, then I'll have some information to go on, and then I'll bring that down from the mysterious fifth direction to, a more, it'll be the 5 directions of attention now because I can talk about it. And so, peace is the derivative. Peace is a mind that's not at war with itself. So if you're doing these directions, you're not at war with yourself. You'll feel peace. However, you know, when I see these emotional charts with these vibrational hertz, I'm like, this is a bunch of shit by people who aren't doing anything. They're not practicing anything. They're not doing anything. They're just reading shit and making shit up, because peace is not an emotion. It's a derivative. We feel it emotionally. But for example, I'm going to jump into a thought experiment, and I have an enlightened society who has never created dysfunction, who has never created psychological roadblock. They don't have a word for peace because they haven't created psychological war. And then they also won't have a word for war or peace because they're not fighting each other. Does that make sense? It's lost its contextual reference. Enlightenment. Enlightenment is the feeling of no burden. Your mind is no longer a burden, and you're just like, that's no, I think there'll still be ebb. No, I think if we talk about flow, we talk about ebb. It's just the wavelength is now very stable. It's very foundational. So, you know, you're in this enlightened society and all of a sudden a rock slips out from under your foot. That's ebb. That's a little bit of ebb. But because you're also in flow, woo, I got my balance really quick and I didn't fall down the mountain. Very beneficial to the species to not fall down the mountain. It continues to change over time. But to say that we have one without the other, I don't think we can't really do that. We can't really interact with that.
So would I not have hurt my back or developed shingles if I was in an enlightened society? I don't know that answer.
I don't know that
And I
answer.
don't,
Yeah.
nobody knows that answer. But I do think there would be less
less.
disease for
There would be
sure.
less accidents.
Yes. Yes.
Because most, like car accidents, most of the car accidents are because people are distracted. It's not just like, oh my God, space junk fell on my car. No, it's you were looking at your cell phone, you were talking to a person, you were playing with the radio, and you hit somebody. That's how that shit happens. It wasn't an accident. It was your negligence that we're calling an accident, because people say accident, didn't do it on purpose. That's not how I look at the word accident.
Yeah. Sometimes it's on purpose.
Yeah, sometimes it is on purpose, and it's definitely not an accident, you know. So how this fits in is when I am engaged in all four directions. How do I engage? Connect, emphasize, and maintain emphasis. Connect, emphasize, and maintain emphasis. The same mantra with the first three pillars as the second three pillars. There are minute differences though, because you're not counterbalancing with the other three pillars. You're exploring. You're already present. If Donna is rooted in her body, she's not coming back to the present moment. She's choosing how to navigate in it. And that's why we get deliberate, or the sixth pillar sometimes I call allowing. I really prefer alignment. You're in alignment with the way that everything is moving. And if it moves sharp, you move sharp. That sharpness could be a hurricane. You know, the environment introduced stimuli that you need to move rapidly with. You have a better chance of doing that with success when you're in those four states, when you're in the ebb and flow. You know, you're in the balance, the powerful ebb and flow, where it's not as tumultuous and all over the place. It's no, this wavelength is strong. It's got some continuity and predictability to it to a certain extent. Does that make sense? And then you end up with this fifth direction. And the only way I get to this fifth direction is by maintaining the first four. At least, I mean, it feels like it takes all four for me to really feel that spirit, to really feel that connection with the unseen. Very difficult to talk about how all of that feels, of course. But it's there, and it's now a point of my attention. And when spirit becomes a point of your attention, we have now started to balance the three islands. And it's something that the natives were doing for who knows how many years, allowing our species to evolve. And in the common mind, that connection to spirit is only felt in happenstance, in circumstance, sometimes on accident. And it's brushes with spirit. What this practice does is it creates space so that we can learn to navigate, explore, and engage the unknown, the unseen. And sometimes we'll bring it from one thing to the other, from one ring of power to the other. We'll bring it from the unknown to the known. We'll never bring the unknowable to, because it's beyond our scope. And I don't know what's beyond our scope because it's unknowable, so we can't talk about it at all. We just acknowledge that, you know, there is infinite and we're not aware of infinite at all times. You know, that just doesn't make sense. Okay, does that seem... So one of those 4 directions could be talking to yourself deliberately. That's your deliberate cognition. You have attention on your deliberate mind. So if you're using the rule of 3, if you're in the dentist chair and you have your eyes closed and you're telling yourself, you know, 11 a.m., 12 a.m., 12 p.m., it's going to come. It's going to come regardless. You're going to be fine. This dentist knows what they're doing. These are the things I was telling myself when I was in the dentist chair. I'm like, she is a trained professional. She's really nice. She seems to know what she's doing. I'm just going to relax and trust her that it's, you know, it's not, she's not going to break my tooth. I'm going to be all right. It sounds like they're scraping the shit out of my teeth. I don't know how that amount of friction doesn't like break more things than it fixes, but I walked out of the dentist last time and everything was in place and clean and sparkling and good. So I'm just gonna, these are deliberate. This is a deliberate thing I'm choosing to do. I'm choosing to engage my verbal cognition as a deliberate act to help me counterbalance, to help me, or not counterbalance, but to adapt. The way that I use counterbalance, that's different, but to help me adapt to a challenge in the present moment using my practice. I do go into my body, as a matter of fact. I was going into my feet. I was going into the position in my body that was farthest away from the stimuli. So they're digging into my mouth. I'm like, well, I'm going to pay attention to my feet and my belly and my breathing and do a laying down meditation, one of my 4 modes. All of that worked. And before you know it, the dentist appointment's done. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. My mouth is numb, but I can still eat in a couple hours, and then I still have the rest of my day to enjoy. Because there was a moment where I'm like, my whole day is shot. You know, the rest of the day, I'm going to taste latex. I'm going to have pain. What am I going to do? It's just Thursday's going to suck. And then, but that doesn't stack up. Now my devil's advocate is my, well, devil's advocate's always helping me. But devil's advocate now says, well, now, Ernest, that doesn't make any sense. That's not true. Why would your whole day be shot just because you had a dentist? How do you even know that? And then I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I don't. Yeah, there's no evidence. There's no reason for me to believe that. Gene didn't tell me that last week he went to the dentist and it was the most, you know, miserable thing and it ruined the next 3. So I don't even have anybody else's experience. What am I going on? Where's this knowledge coming? It's coming from, it's not knowledge, it's fear. And inappropriate
Have any
fear.
appreciation during it? Were you able to
Of
find
course.
any thoughts of appreciation?
Yes, but this is Ernest's mind.
I know, I'm just wanted to know. I'm curious.
Yeah, well, I compared it to ancient times. Contextually, I referenced that I would much rather be in this dentist chair with this degree of pain than going through this in the 16th or 15th century where they give you a shot of whiskey and say, good luck. So I would rather be in this chair right now. I can appreciate modern dentistry as opposed to sitting, you know, with a string tied to my tooth. Or I think the picture that came to my mind was Tom Hanks in Castaway, where he had to use the ice skate and a rock. So my mind was, I'm so glad that I'm not in the Game of Thrones type of era, or, you know, in these ancient times where I got topical ointment so that they could put in the needle that will make my whole mouth numb. So I didn't even, you know, even the needle wasn't that bad because they put a topical anesthetic. And then I'm just thinking to myself, appreciation, anesthetic. Like, I'm so happy that I have anesthetic and I don't have to go through what they're doing. Because I just thought, how miserable would this procedure be without it? It would be impossible. A person I don't think could sit through it. They would pass out up from the pain. Because it's just, especially when they put the laser and it cauterizes the underneath the gums. It's a new thing that they do. They have a laser. And I'm like, why does that laser smell like burnt flesh and bone? And she's like, well, because it is. And I'm like, what? And she's like, well, and then she explained it. She used her t-shirt. And this is the review I'm going to leave after today. I'm like, I'm going to have the second half of my appointment before I leave my review, because they could totally just jack this up and now I have a different review. So if everything goes like it did last time, I'm going to have an excellent review, because the dentist, she used her t-shirt and she's like, well, you can see this is like the pocket of the gum. And you can see it doesn't just instantly fuse to the bone right here at the edge. it's fused to the bone up here in your sleeve. And you have this part of your sleeve that food gets in, plaque gets in, and it starts to increase. And that's what we're doing. We're using our tools to get under your gums and to clean out all of the plaque and all of the dirtiness from, and that's what your flossing needs to do. And she's like, that's what the laser just did. We put a laser down into the gum and it cauterizes the tissue. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't need to know that. That's
You
fine.
know, when I had a similar procedure done years ago, they didn't have a laser, so they didn't cauterize it that way,
Yeah.
and it felt well. I didn't have a practice then either, so
Yeah.
but it felt it felt very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. But I was able to go home. I had Advil ready, but I just didn't take any because that's like Donna, taking anything like that would be a last resort. But it was fine, you know, and it will be fine. And there's going to be times where maybe space junk falls out of the sky and it breaks my arm. I will use my practice. I'll use the 4 directions. I'll navigate. It's not going to be ideal. Like, I'm never going to wake up one day and just say, gosh, I really hope my arm breaks today. Like, I hope I feel that sharp, excruciating pain of a broken bone. Of course not. You know, Gene is experiencing things in his life experience that we don't sign up for. You know, we typically, like, if there's a line and you get to choose between, you know, a weekend retreat or, you know, helping people transition to something new, it's like, I really want to pick the retreat. Like, I really want to just go on a retreat. But we choose to help people for a variety of reasons. And that's, you know, the volition and will that we have as human beings to do things like that, to put ourselves in that position. That's a choice. Volition and will occurred. He put himself in that position because for one reason or another, he wants to, or thinks that he should, or whatever the desire, there's a desire. It's there. And so the desire will be met with fruition, but it can be a very rocky process from desire to fruition. And this practice can help smooth it out. And one of the things I would recommend is allowing yourself to increase the verbal cognition, right? But it's deliberate verbal cognition now. And that now it's a direction. Now you're using your direction of attention, shining it on your own cognition for a beneficial purpose, such as talking to yourself in a productive way. It helped me. And then also, like Donna was recommending, finding other avenues of low-hanging fruit, areas of your body that don't hurt, areas of your current experience, and you can use your voice of power in collaboration with this. What do I appreciate? You know, I appreciate that I'm here for somebody else. I appreciate that I am upholding my personal principles and the things that I believe in by being, you know, there for somebody when they need it. And then hopefully, you know, this isn't necessarily the reason, but maybe somebody will be there for you when it's time, you know, for that type of thing. When we start to transition, maybe there'll be somebody there to help take care of us and to help, you know, make us feel more relaxed and those types of things. So it's win-win-win. You know, it's win for you, it's win for the person involved, and it's win for our society when we start taking care of one another. Is that the same as choosing to go on a lavish vacation, you know, where you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do? No, we're not talking about the same thing, but we can still use our techniques and we can start to maximize the situation the best that we can. And the voice of power can help you focus on appreciation. It can help you focus on what's going right. It can remind you of why you're doing things. It can remind you of the principles involved of why you chose to do these things. In one of my books, I introduce Luna. So you have soul and you have Luna. Soul is the voice of knowing, and sometimes it's the voice of universal intelligence, which is I don't want to say a more advanced version of soul, but it's when I have accepted soul more. When I'm listening to soul more, I can get to that type of interaction. Luna is my devil's advocate. So spoiler alert, you'll meet Luna in the next book. But Luna is the devil's advocate, the one sitting over there like, wait a second, that violates 2 other principles. How does that make any sense? And then I'm like, damn it. And then, you know, Soul's over here like, I got nothing. Like, this is between you and Luna now. Like, if you're interacting with Luna, you don't know. So it doesn't come from soul. Does that make sense? It doesn't come from the voice of knowing if you're still
Makes perfect
doing it in
sense.
your mind. Yeah.
I love that because I'm a science nerd
Hmm.
and I really enjoy experiments.
Me too.
And I really enjoy experiments. And this practice, once I looked at it, when I looked at it through the lens of an experiment with myself, with the totality of my experience, what I've learned is I've got everything I need to navigate this life. And what I don't have is accessible to me. And so I don't need 10 years to learn more, but I like the learning part and I like the experiment. So it's always an experiment with me. Let me see, even if I'm just going to stay on one island right now and I'm going to focus on one island, or I'm going to notice the principles. I like noticing the principles at play. A
Hmm.
friend came for a visit with his dog, his big giant puppy German Shepherd. And boy, they're a handful. And a big giant puppy German Shepherd in my house with all my stuff. And we walked around and I was noticing the principles of the animal interacting with the environment as we were navigating the environment. And that was all an experiment. And even navigating with my back injury or with shingles or with, if I change my mind about this, or if I change the aperture of my lens, how do I feel? Where's my, I still, if I notice my breathing, it really makes me notice my golden line, which increases the space between my ribs, which affects my breathing. And if I say, yeah, well, if I didn't have this back injury, and then I notice my voice is not beneficial to me, my thoughts are not beneficial to me, how did that make me feel? How did that change my posture? How did that change the feeling that I had? Like, it all becomes an experiment with navigating, which was far more interesting to me than evaluating everything and judging everything. That just has a whole bunch of negative emotion associated with it. It's not it's further from peace. I recognize that I'm moving further from peace when I'm doing that. But when I'm involved in this experiment of navigation through life and nature and the flow, and whether it's moving towards a desired feeling or away from a desired feeling, it's more a science experiment, and it feels lighter, and um, the low-hanging fruit becomes more visible, the space becomes more inspirational thought, remembering all the tools that I have, all of a sudden having so many things accessible to me to benefit me
Mhm.
and this experience. And then I have things to offer other people. That it all happens, that whole connection, it all flows much better. There's still ebb in there though. There's definitely ebb in there, but it's in the midst of navigating flow.
Yeah. For me, the ebb is one direction as opposed to all four, right? When I have all four, I feel supremely connected to spirit. When I only
When I'm
have
in a lot of
one,
pain, I'm not in all four often. But
right.
when I really look at it from, this is good for me because I'm a science nerd. When I look at it as an experiment, what principles at play, we've talked about all this stuff enough. So I have enough information, I have enough experience, and I have enough tools. I don't always remember them, but I notice when I don't remember them, and I notice what principles at play when I wasn't paying attention to them. I noticed that I hurt my back when I wasn't at all in my body.
Hmm.
I can see the connection between it all, and it's fun for me. That's a fun activity, and it serves me well. So yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
science experiment and an
Uh,
experiment.
I
Yeah.
love experiments. I love data. I mean, that's why Luna is so strong in my experience because take, for example, when I was doing a lot of Facebook, when I was doing a lot of, I was all over the place, and then there's Devil's Advocate over there. Luna is like, is the attention on you, or is the attention on what you're presenting? And I'm like,
And it also
interesting.
keeps me, because I can go to the magic and the art and get in the, and then I'm totally forgot my body in space, and I
Mm,
totally forgot, like
mhm,
I'm not balancing this whole experiment very well. So it keeps me from sensationalizing or from drifting away from what I'm actually doing
Mm-hmm.
and why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So it really helps me in that aspect, and it keeps me from that polarization that I had of being in one place
Mm-hmm.
or another.
Right.
Yeah, it really helps.
Which is what's so erroneous about that scale of hertz and movement and wavelength. Peace and enlightenment aren't excited states. That's why traditional Chinese medicine, joy is one of the evils, one of the potential evils, because too much joy leads to a type of experience where you're not rooted, you're not grounded, you're not calm, your energy is just all over the place, and that can lead to a type of imbalance that will cause sickness and suffering. So,
Right, it could,
yeah.
and also keep you from thinking that circumstances, you would be better if you could change the circumstances. Like, Gene's experience with being in the woods and how much better he felt when he was there. And there are reasons for that.
Sure.
And if you look at that as a science experiment, why was, I didn't have distractions, but there's plenty of distractions in the woods. I just chose to look at those as positive ones.
Mhm.
And so it was my judgment about the, and whatever. I mean, we could analyze that and utilize that whole practice just by looking at the difference between being in modern society and being out in nature. Um, and why you don't need to be a monk in the woods in order
Right.
to feel what we're talking about here,
Mhm.
and how you. But that's an experiment as well, and see, feeling it when you're in the dentist chair, feeling yourself navigate in the dentist chair and feeling the difference between navigating that on a walk in the woods, and what principles are at play in each is a valuable thing, and it's an important thing. And so that's what I said. All of this makes perfect sense, and the way you've packaged it makes perfect sense. But why is that important to me, and why is it valuable to me?
Mhm.
And the empirical evidence from the science experiment shows me why it's valuable to me and why it's important to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I don't know. I'm one of the things I've decided to do, I do want to do a coursework, because I have all these practices. I know how to put them out there now. I know what doesn't feel right, what doesn't feel good, what type of advertising and what type of putting myself out there, it's more clear to me. But how did I learn? I went through it, and devil's advocate is saying, no, Ernest, this isn't adding up. You're starting to use words that you don't necessarily agree with. You're trying to capture a person's attention. And
What about your writing? Does the writing the books help you formulate coursework in your mind? Does it play a role in that?
No, I feel like writing is for everything that doesn't really have a place in coursework yet, or just is less of a course type of practice and more discussing the feeling and how do I interact with devil's advocate. I don't know if I have to be careful that I'm not selling experience and I'm not selling enthusiasm. I'm not trying to share those things. I'm sharing a practice that can lead to those things, but I'm not sharing those things. So, for example, the way that I interact with inner guru, the way that I interact through anthropomorphizing, the way that I anthropomorphize essence and things like that, I don't think that's a practice. I don't necessarily, it is for me, but I don't know if I'm ready to build that as a practice for other people and say, hey, Donna, why don't you
It's
try
more an
imagining?
art of
It's more of
expression
an
that
art of
you use.
expression, right? So there's a little bit of a difference between the three rings of power and the other things, that I want to talk about and how I want to talk about them. Books are I talk about it differently, sharing experience, sharing the knowledge, whereas a practice it's designed for me to share the principles, the techniques, and then you go do it type of thing. So there's just a slight difference between how I write and how I put courses together. But I would like to either I'm going to sit here and I'm going to make videos on my own, or you all can come and we can make videos for courses and we could kind of do it together. If we do it together, it'll be on a date and a time, and we'll come together, we'll discuss a topic. There can be a little question and answer, and know that the question and answer is going to be a part of eventually paid courses, that type of thing. So if you're interested in that, let me know. We can do it together, or I can do it all on my own. I'm okay with either one. Together seems like
I
more
think that
beneficial.
both are valuable, and one without the other is incomplete. So
Yeah.
I think both is the way to go.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, so all of that is, I'm getting better at planning, getting better at organizing plans. How do plans go from, initial idea to now we're managing it because it's moving along? So we've been working on that with the clinic. I don't like self-advertising, so some of the things I'm doing, I'm going to do through Shenshen because I'm advertising Shenshen. If I do a Facebook Live, I'm just the host. This is Shenshen's Facebook Live. But it will reach a lot of people, and I can do things like that. And devil's advocate will say, well, you're not just shining the light on yourself. It's not all about Ernest. You're interviewing people, you're talking about topics, you're going through the clinic, and that feels better to me. So I'm just learning. I'm learning different ways to do things that feel more in alignment with my personal principles, because that's what guides the direction of attention. So yeah, so there'll be more things down the road. I'm going to share the 4 directions of attention. I think that could be beneficial. If you have one direction of attention active, you are present, you are very likely mindful, and you're deliberately intending, you're emphasizing something in your experience. So the first 3 pillars are set anytime you're maintaining a direction of attention. When you maintain all 4, there's a lot of feeling derivative that I'm not going to talk too much about. I'll let people come to me with it and ask questions about it. That's the best time to deliver it. The best time to deliver any of this is based on the questions that people ask. That's not a very capitalistic way to approach sharing information. It's not. The capitalistic way of sharing information is, this is why you need it. I'm going to show you other people that have had success with it. I'm going to show you all the money you can make with it, all the things you can do with it. Promise, 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 promise. And I can't get down with any of that. So I'm going to find a medium. I'll make it available. That's what a course is. And then I'll be there to answer questions, and eventually others, some of you all can make yourselves available if you feel inspired to answer questions as well. And the motion class I'm going to be doing, I'm either going to do a class or I'm just going to do one-on-ones, but I have the clinic to myself on Sundays starting October 9th. So I still got to kind of iron out what I want to do. If I do a class, it's not going to be a class. It's going to be the Tai Chi experience. It's going to be what I'm doing in one-on-ones. I'm just going to do it in a group setting. We have categories that we fill that day: Tai Chi mind, Tai Chi body, Tai Chi spirit. Tai Chi body, I'll talk about structure. This is the reason that this structure is important, is because the more relaxed my forearm is, I have felt it. The energy flows differently if my forearm is relaxed. If my fingers are relaxed, energy flows differently when there's a structure to the body. There is scientific evidence for that. There is evidence throughout ages for that. I think we've all experienced it personally. So it adds up to the areas of knowledge. But that's kind of how I want to do it. Tai Chi mind, well, how do we take some of the things that we've been learning in today's session with us throughout the day? Tai Chi spirit, let's not talk about anything. Let's just do some movement with some breath. Doesn't involve a lot of learning. I'll explain it briefly at the beginning. And if you do it long enough, you very likely will be able to piece together your own Tai Chi form. You'll have your own Tai Chi home practice that you can do in the space of your arms being extended. One of the reasons that Tai Chi forms are put together in the first place is to establish a martial art. Haven't you noticed that martial arts, every Chinese martial art has form practice, where they put all the forms together in a flow? Tai Chi did that because it was taking the philosophy of the Tao, the philosophy of the I Ching and the Tao Te Ching and other aspects of Chinese philosophy, and they were merging it with martial arts. So while doing a flowing, sequence is nice, and I think there's value in it, that's a part of the martial art. Otherwise, you can isolate portions of the movement and just repeat them and do them over again to get the feeling, and then eventually you can piece it together at your discretion. And then individually, I'll help people do that as well, because having the full clinic to myself, I can take the camera out front, and then I have a little bit more space to move with. But ultimately, the Tai Chi experience that I'm creating is a Shenshen thing. I made it for Shenshen. I'm going to do it through Shenshen. It's not Tai Chi proper. I'm sharing my practice. And I think anytime a person shares their practice, that's an authentic thing. I can't share what I don't practice. That doesn't even make sense. A lot of people try to do that. You see that in martial arts, where somebody's teaching you the first form that they themselves don't even do. So you're not teaching me something that you practice. You're just teaching me something that you've learned. And I'm not into that. I don't want to know what you've learned. I want to know what you do. What do you find benefit from with a consistent thing? Does that make sense? Yeah, so I'll be sharing my practice through Shenshen, through Tai Chi, but it is, you'll see all 6 of these techniques are there. The 6 techniques are there. The number one thing, the method will still be the 3rd pillar. It's a mindfulness movement thing that's based on Tai Chi, but not Tai Chi proper, if that makes sense. Okay, but somebody else looking wouldn't know that it's not Tai Chi proper. They would look at it and it's going to be like, oh, that's Zen Zhuan, and that's, Tai Chi breathing, and that's Tai Chi movement. I will never very likely say, words like leaning, shifting weight. I don't really look at it that way. So I just put attention on this foot, and lo and behold, my weight did its thing on its own, because it's a natural thing to do. So I do approach things just a little bit differently than other Tai Chi teachers, and I think that's okay. I think there's room for both. I don't think it's better. I don't think it's worse. I think mine focuses on mindfulness and the pillars and everything else, whereas others focus on teaching Tai Chi, however they've been taught or how they think it's supposed to be taught. I'm going to share what I do. Okay, so I will see you guys again soon. I'll have updates and things as I do things, but yeah. Everything is pretty clear. And I will have one-on-one opportunities if you want to do the mentoring. All of these systems are offered in 2 ways: informational and then mentoring. Mentoring assumes that you have the information to a certain extent, and I'll share my experiences, other people's experiences. I'll add a little bit of information, but we're doing it together. That's the biggest difference between therapy and some of the other things that are out there, is because the therapist is healing you. This person is doing this for you. A mentoring session, we're in it together. Yeah, I've been doing it longer. I can explain it a little bit more clearly, but I'm not any different. I'm doing my practice, and we can talk about how you can do your practice, and that's mentoring, as opposed to coaching, because what does a coach have? A student, a player. If we look at it in sports, there's a coach and there's a player. In any sport that I've ever been in, the coach is the perceived superior. You don't view the coach on your team as your peer, because that's not how that dynamic works. Well, in a mentoring session, we are peers. We're on a par. We're exactly the same. We've both committed to this practice. We both want to do it. We both want to talk about how to do it, and it helps me as well. So with that said, there's still a cost, but that's the time exchange. Low cost, because that's how I roll. But okay, I got to go too. Got to get ready for my dentist appointment. Today's the left side. And then I'm going to go to the grocery store and get bread. Okay. Have a good rest of your day.
Okay.
I'll see you guys soon. Bye, Lisa. Bye, Ida. Thanks for hanging out.
Bye.
Bye. See you.